I really learned the heart of America. I really believe that the Midwesterners really embody that American spirit. First of all, it is full of optimism, especially when you're coming from Europe, where people are so cynical about everything. Here, people are just so optimistic. And how could they not be optimistic? Because they have the means to their optimism. People for whom nothing really is impossible.
Magatte Wade was born in Senegal. She is now an American citizen. It is a remarkable tale. You're going to hear it only here on the Michele Tafoya podcast. Please subscribe. We'd love to have you with us every single episode because we do a pretty thorough job of vetting our guests and finding out the most interesting, worthwhile guests to have so you can listen to them. She is the co-founder of Prospera Africa. So while she's here and has lived the American dream, she'll tell you about it. She's still haunted by what she knows goes on in Africa. She's written a book called Heart of the Cheetah. She has won awards. She has her own podcast. But here we go in depth with this remarkable woman who recently spoke in front of Congress about why America is thriving and Africa is not. And you may be blown away by what she says because it's not what you typically hear, folks. It is not what you typically hear. This is a remarkable success story, but a woman who is still hell-bent on making Africa a better place for its citizens. And you'll be amazed at what she thinks that's going to take. It's not the typical avenues. Magatte Wade is remarkable. You're going to want to hear this. She is next. Magatte, it is so good to meet you face to face. I've watched a lot of your interviews, your award receptions, many things, and yet I feel still that there's so much to know about you that I want to get into. And so for our audience, I just want to remind them that you were born in Senegal. And I think when you were 2 years old, your parents left to find a better life, but they had to leave you with your grandmother. Do you even remember that moment as a 2-year-old? Because that's very early in a person's life.
Yeah, no, probably not that one. Although they say that, our bodies remember things, and I'm sure probably somewhere in there. No, but separation that I remember very well was the one from my grandmother, some 5 years later, when my parents called for me to be reunited with them in Europe, where they had migrated. That one I remember very well, and it was a rather tragic separation.
Because she had raised you from the time you were 2. Really, she was the parent, right? How close were you?
Like this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read my book, you'll see it. We're just like this, her and I. And I like to say that my grandmother, very much on her own, raised me more like a free range kid, if you will. My grandmother, you see today, everybody talks about, Maria Montessori, and I love a Maria Montessori, style of education, where you basically, it's all based on the child's agency. The kid becomes, very independent very early on. Right. And it's very interesting to me because when you look back at ways of child rearing back in the days, and when I say back in the days, I talk about pre-colonial times in Africa. As it turns out, African people were very much practicing Montessori before Maria Montessori was ever born. And so my grandmother very much had that relationship with me where, I was this little girl, but I always remember her always discussing things with me. If I get in trouble, not in trouble, whatever, we sit down, she will ask me questions. What happened? Why did I think it was a good idea to do this or to do that? And sometimes I would actually change her mind. Sometimes she would change her mind, and sometimes we would agree to disagree. But so she always treated me like that, full on human being. And my grandmother never talked at me. She always spoke with me. Mm-hmm. And even to the point that she always wanted to have this eye level with me. Like, it was very important for her to put herself always at my level, whether she goes down or she puts me up. But that's because she would always say, it's very important because you have to feel in your bones that no one is superior to you. And also the advice she gave me when I was leaving for Germany, when my time came to go, she told to me, she sat me down and she said, you're going to go to this place where almost no one is going to look like you. And almost no one is going to speak your language. And you're going to go to this place where kids have been going to school, where you have not, because I had elected, I didn't want to go to school. Brahma said, leave her alone. She's not going to school. And so she said, but she said, I don't want any of that to intimidate you. And my grandma was very intentional with her words. And she said to me, she said, even though many of them are not going to look like you, and it is still just a different skin color, meaning skin, human skin. They're humans,
Right.
you're human, different skin color doesn't mean a thing. You're just different. It's just a different color. And then she said that although they're not going to speak your language, the language they speak is still a human language, and you are human, so sure enough, you're going to be able to also speak it. And then she said, going to school is what little humans do. You're a little human, you'll be able to do that. And I went there, I went there, and everything that grandma said was true. Everything. And so because of that, I really didn't let it phase me out. Yeah. So I had this little boyfriend. His name was Johann. He was German, little, blonde boy. And it didn't bother me at all. For me, it's all normal. Grandma had said this. And it was the first time I had so many white people around me, because my little village, it was not very common. And anyway, it didn't bother me. And the language, yeah, they were speaking this very weird language, but hey, guess what? Grandma said I could do it too. And eventually, and going to school, a new thing, but okay, I guess I could do that too. And within 6 months, Michelle, I was speaking a perfect, flawless German. I was
That's
the best in my
amazing.
class, although I had a couple of years, but that I was behind everybody. And grandma
Right.
was right. And so for me, I walk in this life with this attitude that truly no one is superior to me, just like no one is inferior to me. And,
Right.
we'll figure it out. We're all humans. So that's my grandma.
She sounds amazing. And so you're 7 years old when you're taken from her. Did you ever see her again? You've heard me talk about sleep cream often, and it's because I really love the product. I believe in the product. I use the product. Let me read you a couple emails from viewers and listeners who have chimed in. From Lorraine E, this stuff is great. I fall asleep quickly, and even when I wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. Thanks for that, Lorraine. I have no midnight anxiety and fall asleep again. Thank you for a terrific product. Don't change a thing. David G says it works. Having chronic pain due to an injury makes it hard to sleep. Now I'm falling asleep faster and staying asleep. Thank you. This is what I've experienced. Now, what is sleep cream? It's not a drug. It's not a prescription. You buy it. It's a topical. You put it on your skin at bedtime, and it allows your body to relax and sleep. And yeah, I was a little bit skeptical too, but this company, Sleep Cream, they use an all natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils, and it helps you sleep. So try it for yourself. If you don't get the satisfaction out of it that I do and all of these listeners do, you can just ask for your money back. No questions asked. You don't even have to return the product. So for the next few weeks, go to sleepcream.com, and it's sleep, CREME. Use the code GameDay at checkout for free standard shipping on your first order. That's code GameDay at checkout. Sleepcream.com, sleep, CREME.com. If you're ready for your best sleep ever, sleep, CREME.com. So you're 7 years old when you're taken from her. Did you ever see her again?
Fortunately, I was able to see her again, but quite few years later. But the other dramatic thing was, but when my grandma passed away, I could not go to her funeral. And this is also what happens to many people who are immigrants, because in our case, we were legal migrants. In this case, at that point, we were in France. We had moved away from Germany to France. And so everything was legal, but sometimes you're in a situation in your legal journey where it's not
Right.
always easy to go, and sometimes
Yeah.
people just don't have the money to go. But in my case, yeah, I was not able to go, and that too felt like a humongous betrayal of life. And that too, it's one of those pains that I have, not to be able to see her one more time, properly say goodbye. Obviously, it's still raw for me, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Well, yeah, it's someone who clearly was so pivotal in your life and really shaped your frame of reference, shaped how you look at the world, which it's a beautiful frame, by the way. If only everyone went through their life that way. I'm curious, you go from Germany,
Yeah.
where you learned to speak beautiful German, then you go to France. Did you have to learn to speak French? I mean,
Yes.
how many languages do you speak? Oh my God.
Yeah. Sorry, but that's why when my parents, after a few years in Germany, said, "Oh, now we're moving to France," I said, "Are you kidding me? Really? I'm just getting comfortable all the way from the boyfriend to the language to the school, and now you're saying we have to go." And but you know what?
Oh,
It was just so weird. And then we went, and again, I listened. I heard what Grandma said. Grandma had said it's fine too. So I went
yeah.
there, and same thing. So again, I have this little magic with 6 months. After 6 months, again, I was the best in that class, and my
So
French was just
you are
great.
really adaptable. I mean, because clearly you don't just jump from not speaking the language to being best in your class without being really adaptable and have some very nice brain tissue. That's pretty remarkable. It's not easy, but I think the fact that you refused to be intimidated, like you looked
Yeah.
at this like this is just where I am in life. I've got to do it. I'm wondering how long it took you when you first rejoined your parents in Germany to find that sort of parental child relationship again with them.
Ooh, that one was tough. That one was tough, and truth be told, I just scratched it barely in the book, so you'll get me to be talking about things that I actually don't. It's you're an interesting interviewer, Michelle, because I really didn't think we would be talking about stuff like this, but I don't think I've ever
I'm
talked.
curious. I'm really curious because to think that they left you at 2,
Yeah,
at 7 years old, you rejoined them. I'm a parent. I know what 7-year-olds are like. That had to be a massive adjustment.
massive, especially if you add to that picture the fact that my parents had two more behind me, and I use these words. They had two more behind my back. That's really how I felt about it. So when I went to Germany, I saw these two little girls, and it's very funny, like in this very funny way, when somebody's related to you, even though you don't know, because there's something about them that looked like me, looked like my parents, and my mom. She was just an idea for me. She was just an idea because the whole time I
Wow.
was in Senegal, it's only my father who would come back and forth to see me.
Okay.
So my
Okay.
mom, I didn't know her. So I remember when I first arrived in Germany at the airport, my mom, it's my aunt who made the journey with me to Germany on the plane. And then when we landed, her and my mom had decided to do this little not joke, but little experiment. And then we passed by my mom, and my aunt said, "Do you recognize this woman? Do you know this woman?" And then I told her, I said, she's a black white German. That's what I said. I guess she's a because in my frame of reference, everybody's black, right? If you're not black, you must be a white something. So I said she must be a black white. She must be a black white German. And then my aunt laughed, and then she said, and then my mother said to me, she said, "I'm your mother," and that was the first time I heard that. Because you have to remember, when I was growing up, we didn't have cell phones or things like that, and
Right. You didn't have
phones.
FaceTime and all that kind of
We didn't have
stuff
any of
to
that
look
stuff.
at her.
Exactly. Exactly. So for
Wow.
me, she was an idea. I mean, mom to me was just an idea. Of course, I could see my mom's friends back home, but for me, I didn't have a mom. I knew she was alive, but I didn't know her. And so this is
Wow.
what happened. And then I arrived in the house, and I saw these other two, two pairs of eyes looking at me. And I'm just like, there's something that attracts you to them, and they were very cute, I have to say. And but and then and then they told me, and then they said they're your sisters, and I'm like, huh?
Oh
Excuse me.
my
So
goodness.
it was just so shocking. And then so bottom line is this: a wedge was always between all of us. I think as sisters, we managed as well as we could. There was no really like this fight or anything like that, because I guess I'm a very much a bossy boss. And so my sisters have agreed very early on that, oh, I guess she's the boss, not only just because she's the oldest one, but you better extend, I've always been that way. Like I'm just literally, when I walk in, it's like, she's arrived. And so I think they intuitively understood that. And then also, I guess it was easy because I was the oldest one also. So in their mind, it was fine. But
Yeah.
truly, they had something in common. They had a closeness between them that I never had, with them. And so, as for my father, it's one of these relationships where, again, I'm saying, I've never, in the book I talk about it, but in interviews, no one goes there and asks me these questions. So the problem you have here is my parents, my father, very much. I was his favorite, his beloved. So basically, from my father would tell you, I don't, she's my oldest, she's my youngest, she's my son, she's my daughter, she's my like I'm his friend, and to him too, very much like my grandma would raise me that way. I didn't have dolls when I was a kid growing up because I didn't want dolls. I was a tomboy, and thank God I was not a tomboy in today's days and age, because by now
Oh,
probably they would have said, "Oh, you're supposed to be a little boy." So thank
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I grew out of that phase, as you know, it usually not naturally happens. But I wanted only chessboards, so all I was interested in was playing chess and chess and checkers. And my dad took it very seriously, so he would buy me some of the most beautiful, handcrafted chess boards for me to play with, and he would play with me, teach me all of that stuff. But the problem is, I think in retrospect, I think my father loved me to the point that it's almost like his own wife did not exist, I guess, or to the point, it's almost like in his mind I was everything. I mean, obviously with no, of course, no, issues of, anything, any of it being inappropriate or
Of
incestuous,
course.
anything like that. It's just
I'm
like I love my
thinking, like,
daughter. No.
I don't, I, if, forgive me for interrupting. I'm thinking that this man
Hmm.
who knew he had to leave a 2-year-old
Hmm.
and watched in the rearview mirror as he left Senegal and he was the one that kept coming back and seeing you grow,
Yeah.
and that guilt. Meanwhile, your mother and moms have a connection with all of their babies.
Hmm.
And so she's raising the other two.
Hmm.
And your dad's still feeling this sort of, I've got to get Magatte, I've got to get her back. And she's my first. There is something about the first. And I need her back in the, I wonder how much he was making up for lost time, and probably a certain semblance of, just wanting to make sure that you were really okay.
It's a very good point you raise, and definitely, in therapy it has come up because I had to do some of it, but it comes up and it makes beautiful sense. And this is why today I like to tell people at this point it's between my mom and God, really, the way she treated me. But she very much treated me like a co-wife, like almost like a rival. I was a rival in her mind. It seems like I was the rivals in my father's heart, and she took it very not well, actually. And so
Mm.
all of that translated into a lot of abusive behavior, verbally, physically, everything. It's just like almost like like imagine if you have your husband has this other woman or whatever, and like how
Right.
vicious sometimes one can be. And but the problem is, I had no defense for myself. When you a 7-year-old gets a vitriol of such scorned women, and you grow up like that, and her whole goal the whole time was to find a way to really create a wedge between me and my father, almost like a reason for him to kind of give up on me. And it just never happened. I think the more she did, the less it happened. And eventually at some point, it was clear to me that if I don't leave this household, death will be next. Death, physical death, probably. And if not that, at least death of the soul. At some point, how much
Oh,
can one take? Even though I'm a very resilient person. So in any case, it's a very tragic story. And
wow.
it is but again,
Wow.
it is what it is. Yeah.
Well, see, that's what I love about your frame of mind, that we things happen to us. We can choose to let that crush our souls and turn inward and feel victimized, or do something about it and deal with it and overcome it, which clearly you have. So Senegal, Germany, France. When did you come to America?
I came to America in late '98. I arrived in America, and first I was in Columbus, Indiana. I have to say I had such a wonderful time there. It is there in Columbus, Indiana, that I learned that I was actually not speaking English. I was speaking British. And there was a because back in school we learned British, right? British is what we learned.
Okay.
I had that it's the accent that I had and all that, so nobody could understand what I was saying. Between that, when I tried to switch to English, I was having this weird British accent mixed with this weird French accent. All of that, people were like, "What are you speaking?" And then how the British have different terms, like I'm going to take a lift instead of I'm going to take the elevator, and all of
Right.
these different things. And and also, so there I learned to speak proper English, I should say, American English, and
American.
also
Yeah.
American English. And it's also there that, Michelle, I really learned the true heart of America. And that's why also later on, when I arrived in San Francisco, and because eventually I went on to live on the two elite coastal elites,
Mm-hmm.
parts of the U.S. And I'm very glad that I started with the Midwest. I was in Columbus, Indiana, because there what I learned again was what is the true. I call it the true American spirits. If people in New York and the people in San Francisco are going to be mad at me for saying this, so be it. I really believe that the Midwesterners really embody that American spirit, if you
How
ask
would you
me.
describe that spirit? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's a spirit that, first of all, it is full of optimism, especially when you're coming from Europe, where people are so cynical about everything. Here, people are just so optimistic. And to the point that European people would try to say, they conflate it with naivete. Americans are big kids.
Yes.
No, 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 they're not. They're just optimistic people. And how could they not be optimistic? Because they have a means to their optimism, right? So so the spirit is very optimistic people who just, for whom nothing really is impossible. And also generosity, a spirit of generosity, the generosity that I was the recipient of. It's amazing. I arrived in this town, small town, and I you know it's so interesting because they welcomed me with open arms, and there was nothing in there that felt
Were
patronizing.
you by yourself? Were you with a parent? Who did
No,
you come over with?
thank you. Good question. So when I came, during business school, in the last year of business school in France, because I did a business school in France, and last year of business school we had an exchange program with the
Ah,
US.
okay.
And then I
Okay.
had a host family, the Wences. And I always like to say their name as much as I can, Carol and Eldon Wentz, and their children. They're just the best people. They're like I call them my first American family. They're like my first,
Oh,
how they say the first lady, whatever. They're my first
yeah.
American, they're my first family. And really, Carol played the role of a mother for me. Like the role of what a normal mom has, she played it. And eventually life would go on to give me five moms. By now I have five moms. Okay, five moms, real moms. And one of them is Jewish, one of them is Christian. I mean, they're all over and they all love me. And it's just wonderful people. So Carol and Eldon, welcomed me into their home. They had told me after business school, Carol knew about all the problems back home. She says, "My God, when you're done with school, you want to come here, we would happily have you here. We have work for you. We have everything here for you. You just give us a word." I don't think she thought I would take her to her word. Literally. So I called her, I said, "God, I'm coming. I'm leaving this place." Um,
Oh,
so I came, and they sponsored me for my H-1B visa.
okay.
They paid for it. I was living with them at first until I felt like I was ready to get my first apartment. When it was time for that, they made themselves my guarantor on the lease agreement. On
Wow.
top of that, they worked with their church to, who has an apartment that they want to rent. And I remember Mrs. Doris Falk came to the front and she's like, "I have apartment. We would love to have Magatte." And of course I didn't want to hand out. They gave me the price. I worked for it. I paid for it. And that's what I mean. So the spirit of generosity. And also, I love how serious so all of these people were about their faith. And so, what you had, yeah, it was optimism. It was people who were really hardworking people and smart working people. It was people who were uber generous. It was people who saw the good in everybody else, because the world we live in, I think they're looking up, not down. And so that's the spirit of what I saw there. And I also saw, like, families, how what they do on weekends. Every weekend, there was, had a big meal at Carol's home. It was amazing.
You were really submersed in that town in Indiana, in, Americana, which has really on in San Francisco, LA, New York, Washington it is seen as Pollyanna, or as you've said, like in Europe, they see Americans as big kids, but in fact, it's optimism, because
Yeah.
we know what hard work can do. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too that you've said how generous people were with you. You didn't want handouts,
Mhm.
but people were generous. And
Yeah.
you are from a country that really had so little, and you continue to do business in West Africa. And so I just, all of these changes that you experienced, and yet you have stayed in touch with with your community in West Africa. Um, what is it that you want to impress upon the people that you grew up amongst about where they are and where you are, and what can actually be for them?
Sure. So the way I would answer that is in two prongs. The first one is, remember when you asked me when I arrived in Germany, and I thought you were. So when I arrived in Germany, what I would love for people to understand that are listening to us is, I really wanted to take them in my little shoes, my little 7-year-old shoes.
Hmm.
When I arrived in Germany, I looked around and I thought to myself, how come they have this and we don't? And literally in that moment, what I was thinking about was that back home, when grandma said, "Magatte, it's time for your shower," I knew that I had a good 45 minutes to go play some more, for sure. Why? Because I knew that grandma had to get a stove of coal going, and put the pot of water on it, wait for it to boil. Then we would put it into a bigger bucket, mix it with colder water for safer temperature for me. Then somebody stronger than her would drag it to the shower area. And there at last, with a little plastic pot, I can take from the big tank to my body, back and forth. That's what shower meant. 45 minutes to an hour time it would take before I can do that. Here in Germany, mom says, "My God, jump in the shower." I'm like, "Where's a bucket of water? I'm not getting cold naked in this weather." And she said, "Come on, you silly, just jump in the shower." I jump in, turn around the nods. The water's coming down at the temperature that I want. You can even play with the pressure. I'm just like, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is some sick type of juju. What type of what? I was just like, whoa. And it was like that about the grocery stores too. I walk into this grocery store, there's more types of apples and breads than my little brain can count. And then the paved roads. And I'm just like, whoa. And yeah, I was like, how come they have this and we don't?
And before you finish, because what's instantly jumping in my mind, my God, is that the real the liberal left, the bleeding hearts would say, "You're right. How come Africa doesn't have that, but Germany and America have that?" Well, you know what? We shouldn't have it, because it's not fair to those people in Africa. Rather than saying, how do we
yes,
get that implemented in other places that would like it? They,
that's right.
they want to bring everyone else down to the, because
Down.
I think the guilt, they can't handle the guilt. I don't really know what is at the core of it, but instead of saying, yes, you can have this in Senegal, they want to say no one should have it if not everyone can have it.
No, absolutely. And you are making a very good point. And it is there, Michelle, where I want to say to those people, and usually sadly, they happen to be on one camp, which is on the liberal camp, one of the
Mm-hmm.
more even extreme side of the liberal camp. And I want to tell them, not only that's going to be helpful to no one, but most importantly, if you want to go back to poverty, be my guest. Me, I want prosperity. Let that be clear. So if your solution is, oh, we all need to go back down together, no, be my guest. Just you be there. So what is interesting is that question became the defining question of my life. You know how kids can be obsessed. I was obsessed with that question. And eventually, along the way, the journey, the question became, how come some countries like mine and so many in Africa are poor while others are rich? And along the journey, I would keep my ears, eyes, mind open to to that. And I've heard it all. I've heard people invoke the IQ theory. I've heard people invoke the malnutrition, the lack of education, although half of all the graduates in Africa cannot find a job. And the more educated you are, the more degrees you have, the more likely you will be to be unemployed. Wrestle with that. People say it's because we're lazy. People say it's because of racism. People say it's because of colonialism. I hear all of this, and then none of them make sense, Michelle, because let's even take the colonialism, which is the one that people like to invoke all the time. And I said, if colonialism was a reason why, then how come Ethiopia, which has never been colonized, forever has been the poster child for poverty in Africa? You explain that to me. Conversely, nations like Botswana that have been colonized have been one of the top performers on the continent since the end of colonialism. When you talk about the low IQ, lazy people, whatever, the same people, how come the same people, the minute they make it to the USA or the minute they make it to, Germany or places like that, all of a sudden they can self-actualize? So I'm thinking to myself, it's not about these people. The only variable in this equation is the place. What is it about these places that when you're there, you can't make it? Or when you're there, you can make it? And eventually I went into my little life. At some point, when I arrived after 9 months in Columbus, Indiana, it was clear that I had outgrown all my responsibilities. Carol and Eldon felt it would take me a couple of years to do all the work they gave me to do, because I had to go back with all of their accounting, work on, create some marketing plans, do all types of things. And in this case, it was not 6 months, but it's in 9 months. Carol is like, and then she said to me, she said, "Magatte, you clearly have a big future. Your future is so big that it's not something that we can, but it's here. This place is too small for you." And she said, "Now we could be selfish and keep you here because we love you and we want to have you here. But we also have to do the right thing and release you, and so you can deploy your wings." And eventually, love also called me in San Francisco at that point. So I went to San Francisco, and there, going quickly because I know we don't have much time, but there, I was a headhunter in finance, working, staffing companies like Google, like Netflix before they became household name brands, and doing extremely well for myself, extremely well for myself. By age 25, I had achieved my American dream. I bought a home in, I think, if not the most, one of the 3 or 5 most expensive zip codes in America, just to say I have achieved my American dream, just through that. But you know what? One day, Michelle, I was driving down Big Sur. It was one of those moments of pure enjoyment and feeling gratitude for God and all the people He had brought into my life, exercising His grace through each one of them. All the people who helped me, the Weldons, the Wences, the Bermans, everybody. And eventually, but every time I feel that way, Michelle, the very next second, I feel like hell. Every time I feel this joy, this gratitude, realizing how far I've come and how much grandma must be proud of me, then I get, it's almost like a switch goes off in my head. And when that switch goes off, everything becomes dark. And with the darkness comes a pain. And the pain just keeps coming down on my head like the sky. And what it is just because in those moments, as soon as I feel happy, I also feel the plight of people back home. When you ask me, why am I doing what I'm doing? So in those moments, I am reminded of these stories that I still go through to this day. Every 2 weeks, you hear new stories of people, young people, packing themselves into fishermen's boats, on their way to Europe to find a job. The boat capsizes most of the time. Right now, you've got thousands of people, dead people, lying at the bottom of the ocean, serving as fish food. Sometimes, and when it's not that story, it's the story of a body that drops off of somewhere above England, because somebody thought it would be a good idea to hide into the landing gear of a plane on their way to finding a job in Europe. Or you open the cargo section in Paris Charles de Gaulle, and you find a frozen dead body in the cargo section because somebody thought it would be a good idea to hide there. And when they don't go sea route, they don't go air route, they go land route, then they get stuck in Libya and or Tunisia. In Libya, you get sold between $300 and $500. That's my price as a slave. It took for CNN to talk about it for the world to know this existed. So when I ask people, if you are a normally constituted person, how can you not be haunted by this? And at the end of the day, Michelle, I'm a haunted person. That is pretty much what it is. And so that day, though, usually when that would happen, my coping mechanism was to tell myself, look, girl, this has been here way before you birth and will sadly be here long after you're gone. So perhaps see if you can at least manage to live a good, decent, good life for yourself and more life. And then that we should call it a good accomplishment. But that day I was not having it. My body went on to just like shaking. There was something going on in that car. And I stopped the car as soon as I could. I avoided an accident by this. And stopped the car and got out of that thing, and my body, there was nothing left in it. And that's just so what happened naturally is that I just fell to my knees. And as I fell to my knees and as the pain was just not letting go, my only reflex was surrender, true surrender. And right there, I surrendered to God. And I said, God, from here on, whatever I'm going to do, whatever breath you give me, I want to put it towards the betterment of my people, of my and my continent. I don't know what I need to do, though. You're going to have to help me, but I promise you that I will show up every day. And from here on, no more fooling around. And I got back in the car, and it was so peaceful. And I just knew in my heart of hearts, nothing would ever be the same again. And that's what happened. So then I went home, and a few short months later, I went back home to Senegal, and just to notice that the hibiscus I grew up with, this juice made of hibiscus, the women being the primary, ones who grow it and making it their livelihood, were losing their livelihoods, getting out of their countryside, going to the cities, they're becoming maids, treated like crap. And just this, like the cycle of poverty was going deeper. And that's when it started. And so right there, criticized by creating, because Favre said, never come to me with your problems, but I want to make sure that you have thought of alternatives. They don't have to be the right ones, but I need to know that you're in solutions mode, because no victimhood here. And so, criticized by creating. So I started a company, and the company the product was going to be these juices, so we could bring them back. And we were going to put women back to work. And at the height of it, we put 9,000 women back to work. And that was my solution to this problem. And so that's what I've been doing. And, but when I started that first company, Michelle, that's when God gave me my answer, my lifelong answer to the answer to my lifelong question. Because when I built that company, we had a sister company in the US, a sister company in Senegal. And I was shocked. I was shocked at the discrepancy of the ease of doing business. About everything, the labor laws, turns out in my country, at least, the state had to agree with who you hire, and also when and how you can fire somebody. Just that, and labor laws so stringent. My country is one of the most protective of employees on paper in the world. How does it translate in life? We are one of the 25 poorest nations in the world, because that's what happens when everything is so overregulated. So licenses, the tax code being so complicated, it's like we're truckloads of laws and regulations. And at first I thought to myself, I guess it's because we're poor that everything is so cumbersome, and they're rich, that's why everything is so easy. Because you compare in the US, back then, it was in late 2003, 2004, when I created my first company, you would see that there it took me less than a day to apply for my to legally register my business in the US. In Senegal, around the same time, it took us almost 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Less than half a day, almost 2 years. Okay. And here in America, you needed $20 back in the days to open a bank account. Over here, thousands of dollars. Okay. And so on. And it was like that about everything. And eventually, so I thought it was because we're poor. But then the minute you say that, you think to yourself, well, you're poor because you have no money. You have no money because you don't have a source of income. A source of income for most of us is a job. Where do jobs come from? The private sector, businesses. Yet, do those businesses happen in a vacuum? Don't they also need something? They need an enabling business environment. Oh, but you
Mm-hmm.
just told me that African nations have the suckiest business environments in the world. Economic index after economic index, we see that Africa is the region in the world where entrepreneurs have the least freedom to enterprise, where entrepreneurs have the least economic freedom. So there, I had my answer. Africa is the poorest region in the world, not because we're lazy, not because we're low IQ, not because of colonialism, not because of racism, not because of any of that. It's the poorest region in the world because it happens to be the most over-regulated region in the world, which means our would-be wealth creators, aka entrepreneurs, cannot do their magic of building wealth for themselves and everybody around them, and thus creating prosperous nations. And that's why when Congressman Raskin had the nerves to tell us that none of that matters, but why are we here to talk about this? I'm like, do you love your country? Do you love America? And do you care about America remaining a powerful nation in the world, the most powerful nation? Do you care about that? Do you understand? How do you tell me that you don't understand economics without telling me you don't understand economics? Mr. Raskin, I'm deeply offended by what you said there. These issues of regulation, overregulation, has been made into a matter of partisanship. Are you from the left or are you from the right? I don't care. Because where I come from, the overregulation causes us to be where we are. My continent, Africa, is the poorest region in the world today because it happens to be the most overregulated region in the world. It irks me when I see us sitting in these rooms and when I hear your fights, I don't hear government working for the people. I see government working for government, whatever the heck that sounds like. It is clear that these regulations are not put in place with us in mind, and that needs to stop. And the fact that, Mr. Raskin, you're here this whole time we've been here, you've just been complaining about the process. At some point, what is the end game? Isn't the end game to make us, the American people, better off? Isn't it? Isn't it? No, I hear you saying that the stuff that would make us better off doesn't matter. All you care about right now is the process of Musk and his associates are not doing this the right way. Is the goal moral and right or not? When he said that, I found it so dangerous. I was scared. I was alarmed. And in addition to the fact that, I felt like he was wasting our time, frankly, And so this is what I would like also for Americans to understand. This country could go down very quickly because rules and regulations, they strangle entrepreneurs. And when you strangle entrepreneurs, you're strangling your prosperity and you're strangling your innovation. That's it. And without that, no nation can have a voice, power, or anything. It all starts with that. And so for me, it is not lost on people like me. And overregulations means the difference between life and death, literally, as we're seeing people crossing over to go find a job and they die in the process. It means the difference between war and peace. Because normally we know that when nations work with each other, usually if they don't go to war with each other, and even if they're going to go to war with each other, they're going to think about it for a very, very, very long time. And it might not be as bad as it would have been if they had no, attached ties. And it also means the difference between human dignity or not having it. So this stuff is so powerful. I'm just like, you just don't get it, do you? So that was
well, people who have grown up in the freest nation on earth take it for granted. And you have lived in a number of different situations and you understand it. Where are you in your haunted journey? Because that sounds like a tough way to live if you're constantly haunted by knowing the plight of others and feeling so attached to it. And I can only imagine that. So clearly you're doing business. You've got business in Senegal. You've got business here in the United States.
Yeah.
What's giving you hope from that moment that you sort of turned it over to your faith and decided you're going to be the solution? No victimhood. I love that. It's like that's not going to get us anywhere. What we need to do is look for solutions. You're doing that. So what's your level of hope right now for Senegal and really for all of Africa? Keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. This email brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right into your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at salempodcastnetwork.com/Trump. So what's your level of hope right now for Senegal and really for all of Africa?
It's very high, and it goes straight to what you were asking me, like, where is your level of where is your hauntedness at? Basically, my hauntedness now is no longer the same. I mean, I am still, inhabited by these visions and these dreams and these nightmares, and sadly, they're not just nightmares. You open the paper, you read it. On social media. Yeah, on social media, whenever somebody sees something about it, they tell you about it. Like just this week, somebody emailed me and said, "My God, did you read this? It says it confirms. It says everything you were saying," because it was an article. I think it was in one of the major U.S. papers, and it's talking about all the mass graves that they have found in the desert. Because these are the people when they're caught in Tunisia, the Tunisians round up the African immigrants, and then they take them to the desert, and then they push them out. And then many people, as you can imagine, under those harsh conditions, don't make it. And so they're finding these places. And so my friend, so it's now that people are like, oh, and now we're paying attention. So anyway, in my case, what happened is once I discovered that, then I thought to myself, okay, now that I understand it, this is very interesting. What are the solutions to this? And so at first, so I realized that being an entrepreneur was a good thing, and I need to continue creating jobs, back home. So that's why I'm still an entrepreneur. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, but we got to do more. We got to have many more companies being able to be born and grow. And so for that, I need to really focus on reforms. That's when I became really serious about reforms, understanding regulations, understanding over-regulations, understanding law, understanding the relationship between all of that, and and economics and everything. I just became obsessed with understanding how all of this works. And eventually that led me to becoming the director for the Atlas Network, which is the largest network of free market think tanks in the world. And as such, I was overseeing the one for Africa. I'm still with them as the senior fellow because we don't have the centers anymore. But so within Atlas Network, that's part of what I do, is work with our partners on the ground who are working on taking down barriers of entry for entrepreneurs. So, for example, in Burundi, our partners over there have actually released millions of women so that they can be entrepreneurs and have businesses, because in the constitution, it was not, women couldn't have property rights. So silly stuff like that our people are working on and, unleashing people all over the place. So they're doing amazing work. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, this is still piecemeal legislation. These reforms, as good as they are and as necessary as they are still piecemeal legislation, meaning that by the time we knocked one down here, 10 more have propped up over there. Meanwhile, I've got millions and millions of young people coming to an age of needing work in Africa that find no work. This is a ticking bomb. This is a ticking bomb. This is going to be a wave that's not going to leave anybody standing, including Americans. Because if you think Africans are going to stay home, they're not. I mean, when they find some of these people who made it through the desert, they have seen 90% of their comrades die on the journey. And you ask them, will you go again? And they say, as soon as I have recovered, I'm going back. They're going to try again. When the prospect of death is better than the prospect of staying home, you've got a problem. People are not going to stay. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, what do? I need something much bigger than this. And so that's why I started looking and becoming much more interested into the concept of what some people call it startup cities, some people call it charter cities, some people call it free cities. So what these are, literally what they are next generation special economic zones that have their own law and their own governance when it comes to business. So what we're doing here is in African nations, when you find a leader that finally gets this, then on a rather unoccupied plot of land, so you're not disrupting anything, because you don't want to disrupt the oligarchs. You don't want to disrupt life and what's going on. Even if you're telling these people, hey, what we're creating is going to be better for you, you don't force people into anything. You create the alternative and let the alternative speak for itself. So that's what these cities are. They have their own law, their own governance. Basically, it's on a foundation of common law, which is really truly one of the best gifts from the British common law. Is like, it's so superb, but you might want to think it came from God, literally.
Mhm.
And so on a bed of British common law, running on an e-systems, on an e-system, having embedded in it choice of law as well as choice of regulation, as choice of regulatory body, which means you get to escape, the captured regulatory bodies usually, as you know, for example, FDA, so plays with big pharma to choose who is a winner and who is not a winner, which
Yeah.
drugs we get access
Yeah.
to, and all of that. So because they're the only people who get to regulate, our drugs and stuff like that. So here you have choice of law, choice of regulatory body, and all of it is designed by the best minds in the world for these type of things. And so that's what I'm working on now. So I'm the co-founder
Wow.
for Prosper Africa, and we are only a few months, if all goes well, away from being able to announce the first country where we're working on this, where we're going to be doing this. Things are in the works. The legal framework, we have bills being passed in Parliament to kind of get the legal framework right. So basically, what this is, the best way to think about it, Michelle, is when you hear in the US people talking about freedom cities. That's exactly what it is. These freedom zones or cities, I don't know. Yeah, I think they call them freedom cities. So because even in the US, because once things have gone so bad, it becomes too hard to clean up or to renovate. At some point, when the house is so crooked because too many
Hmm.
things have been messed with, it's better
Right.
to just go and do tabula rasa. But in this case, what you do is you integrate what we call the general repealer. So that is it's a legal tool that allows you to say, when it comes to commercial laws, we're not talking family, immigration law, or defense law, or anything like that, because that's needs to stay with the state control. But for everything else, business laws, you say, we're going to start clean, wipe it all out, start over.
Interesting.
And when you start over, you have to keep it as clean as possible. No more of all of these stupid regulation that come out of all over the place. Perhaps we should be looking into liability law to fix some of this problem rather than having to have it be a law. So anyway, that's kind of what we're doing. And it's interesting to me that it's now that in the West, in America, people are talking about overregulation now so much, and I've been screaming in the wilderness, guys, this is what the problem is. And now they're
Yeah.
talking about doing freedom cities when we've been doing prosperous cities. There's one in Honduras right now. So that's when you ask me, Magatte, where is the state of your hauntedness? I have
Mhm.
to say, you're haunted when you feel like there is a problem that you can't solve. Then it becomes, but when you think and when you're convinced that you're working on the solution, when you're convinced that there is a solution, number one, that alone is good. And two, that you're working on it, then yeah, that's
Then
my cure. That's my
Well,
cure. So
that
I
is
am.
a cure. And I think that's so true for so many people. Hey, before I let you go, I would love to just get in our last minutes here. When you see African Americans, Black Americans here in the United States who have no idea what it's like to live in Senegal or anywhere in Africa, complain and talk about victimhood and how the stain of slavery on America will never be erased and how reparations are the only answer and all of those things that make them victims rather than agents of their own future. What do you want to say to them?
I want to tell them, try this little trick. It always works. See if you can criticize by creating. Criticize by creating. And if you're not creating, the problem might not be with what you're complaining about, but you might look straight back at yourself. And we all have we all have room to create. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It's little steps. You can be part of the solution. And there are many things that need to be done. For example, I see some of my friends, at whether it's the folks over at Urban Specialist, who are working on reducing and basically taking away the violence in black urban neighborhoods, in this case in the south side of Dallas. This is a man who has found redemption, who Anton Lucky is one of the co-founders, and we lost our beloved Bishop Omar. He's gone. But anyway, these guys are not blaming anybody all day long. What they're doing is, hey guys, we know what to do, and let's do it together. So I see people pulling themselves literally, but it's not just like, oh, go and pull yourself by the bootstraps. It's like, you're going to need to pull yourself by the bootstraps. I know you're down at the bottom of a pool right now. You're feeling like crap. You're not feeling good or whatever. And I'm going to come straight there to help you right from there. But we're going to have to climb back up together. We're not staying at the bottom of this pool. We're going back up together. It's fine. And so I think it's about that. It's about look at solutions and don't dwell on the past. The past is not to be forgotten. If nothing else, at least to honor. We have to honor the memories and what happened in the past. But the best way to honor the past, I would argue, is to not forget it, but rather build the future so that that past never happens again. And so for me, that's what I would really encourage them to do. And also remind them that feeling bad for yourself, however victimized you might have been, my Bishop Omar would say, no matter what happened to you, you're responsible for what you do for you. And I think it's such a powerful reminder. And I also want to tell them, once you start to flip that in your mind, when you get into that mindset of solutions and can-do attitude, you start to see the world with a whole new lens. And you also start to sense more love. You are able to receive more love, and you're able to also radiate back more love. It's just a really beautiful cycle. And I would say what it does, it's just, and it takes us back to that key thing, which in my mind is love. So I will tell them to try that. And if they don't know how to do it, connect with people who may know how to do it. Do not stay with doomsayers. If you're a doomsayer right now and you want to move forward, cut those ties and start working with people who are optimistic. And little by little, surely a new habit will form. But it is in that new habit that you will find more happiness and be more success. So it's just really not rocket science, and it's not that hard to do.
Yeah, you don't need one of Elon Musk's algorithms to figure it out. It's a very human, and we're all born with it. We're all capable, for the most part. But boy, what a pleasure to speak with you. We've got to do it again because there's so much more to get to. And but I'm so fascinated by your story. Everyone's got a story, but some are really unique. And that is yours. And I love what you're doing with your life. It's truly remarkable, and it is a demonstration of love for human beings. So I applaud you, and I hope we can have you back, Magatte. She's Magatte Wade. She is brave as hell. She's doing a whole lot of good. I would encourage you to do the same. Be brave, do good. We will see you next time.